Who are this year's best shooters, and is volume or percentage a better indicator? Find out next on Locked On NBA Big Board. Hello and welcome in. Thanks for making Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen every day. We are free and available on wherever you want to get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Leif Thulin. I watch a ton of college basketball. I'm joined by Richard Stayman, aka Mavs Draft, who is an unbelievable follow on Twitter. Has been nicknamed the Clip God and is an overall wonderful guy. I'm especially excited to talk with him about shooters because him and I both geek out about the art of shooting a basketball. And so today we're going to talk about what is the best indicator for being a great shooter and who are in the 2024 NBA draft class's best shooters. Let's dive right in. Richard, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a second, but since we did this together, but the crew's reunited.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, let's start it off hot. Who is your favorite shooter? Doesn't have to be best, doesn't have to be ranked out, but who do you want us to discuss first on the upper echelon of shooting in this year's draft class?
Yeah, let's start with my number one shooter, and that is Reed Shepherd. You don't luck into 50% shooting on high volume from three. I think he's safely the best shooter in this draft. Like you can't argue against a guy who is. It is so rare, by the way. I really don't know a prospect that I've ever seen that makes more than he misses from three. Like that's ridiculous to be.
Yeah, no, he's my number one 3-point shooter as well. He was 52.1% for those of you listening. And then if you guys subscribe to the free throw percentage is the biggest indicator, he shot north of 80% there as well. So he checks all boxes. And obviously there's question marks about what position does he play, but we're not analyzing that. We're discussing his shot. The thing that impresses me so much about him is he's not very tall. And he's very high on the scouting report, like, oh, don't let him shoot. Well, he gets the ball off in a hurry. So his preparation's really good. His catch and shoot numbers and his kind of one dribble pump fake to the left, slides to three. He can shoot it with movement, although he didn't do that much. It happened, but I would love to see him work on that little right foot, left foot if he's going left, right, left foot, right foot if he's going right. And I think he has every bit of capacity to do it because he's a technician on the form. Is there anything that stands out to you about his shot, just like in terms of the mechanics that you think makes him so good?
Yeah, I mean, the release is super fluid, and the most important thing is that he gets into his shot motion, not only with beautiful footwork, but like in terms of just accuracy, but the quickness he gets into that shot is also remarkable. Like just the way he is able to quickly stop on a dime. Like there are a lot of times if you watch him in isolation or with a pick and roll coming, or excuse me, with a screen coming, he will take that one dribble, do a wide little dribble to make the defender think that, he's going to maybe take a few dribbles and then shoot or drive, whatever it is. And then he comes out, immediately just pops, and it's almost an unguardable move because of how quick his feet are.
Yeah, his preparation is what stands out the most to me. And also, for those of you concerned about height, not that it really impacts the shot that much, he's got a high release. And I like that in a guard because sometimes you see these one motion shooters, and Steph and Trae Young are the only two. They're not as much of like catch and shoot guys. Like Klay Thompson has that pretty catch and shoot form. Reed Shepherd's one of those guys. And I teased in the intro that I think a lot of players that I deem to be the best shooters have really good volume, more so than even percentages. Reed Shepherd checks both boxes. He's that rare of a shooter. He shoots 4.4 threes per game. And I think there are going to be players who hoist up more than he does, but I think it's because he played fewer minutes and on a team with a lot of horses to feed. So that I think he's pretty safely the best shooter in this draft class as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much of an argument. Like I said, 52% from three.
Who's your number two? Because I figured we were both going to agree on one.
Yeah, my number two shooter actually is not somebody that's consensusly mocked into that first round. I have Peyton Sandford from Iowa. I think he is a ridiculous level shooter. I mean, I think he was 90% from three, or excuse me, 90% from the free throw line, plus 40% from three. And if it wasn't 40, I know it was a little bit lower, but it was hovering around that. But it's more than just that, right? He comes off of screens incredibly well. Like he plays. I hate calling every white shooter Duncan Robinson, whatever. Like a lot of people will do that. Truly, if there is a Duncan Robinson in this class, it is him. Like he has such a strong ability to come off of screens, and it's not just have that lethal moving shot with good size, but it's also knowing how to play off of your screener as a shooter. And it's just such a rare trait. It's why Duncan Robinson has been one of the best at his art, is that extra ability. And I think Sanford has that plus some underrated off the dribble scoring.
And he's a pretty good athlete as well. I'm right there with you. Actually, that was my number 2, so we are on the same page. Just for revisiting some stats, I dug up a few stats for Shepard: 51.4 on catch and shoot, 45.5 with a hand in his face on guarded catch and shoots, and 57.4 on unguarded catch and shoots. So an unbelievable shooter. As for Peyton Sanford, I actually am right there with you in terms of him being number 2. And I made a little board. I haven't quite finished it, and I've been teasing it for a while. But I have Peyton Sanford as my 33rd ranked prospect. So I think his shot has a chance to get him into that first round. I know I have him just outside, but because he's that good of a shooter, Sanford is one of those guys that on a basketball court is dangerous from 30 feet and in. His range is unbelievable. His release is lightning fast. He's got a high release and a high like jump on his shot. And it's not even that he like jumps like to the moon, but he jumps quickly into his shot and his release is high, so it's unblockable. And like I said, he's an underrated athlete, and why that matters, like you're like, well, who cares if he's an underrated athlete? We're not analyzing that. We're analyzing shooting, and that's a fair point. But the reason it matters is he's able to run off of screens quicker than a lot of players who are these like true motion shooters. Like he is, like you said, Duncan Robinson, who comes off pin downs on floppy action and gets his feet ready and elevates in a hurry. And so he's one of those guys that I think, because of his volume, even if his percentage would suffer at times, is one of those was type of players where you can run action for him to shoot and he'll be able to create that shot no matter what level of defense. Like the NBA can defend or the Big Ten defense, his feet will be ready, and he's got his. It's so quick and it's so refined. He has days where he can't miss, and the hoop looks like a hula hoop as well. And even on off days, he's a good shooter. So I'm right there with you. I love that call.
Yeah, appreciate it. I feel like, again, he can also shoot off the dribble. Like there's one game where he had multiple spin jumpers, and that to me is just like, all right, like there's clearly skill with this shooting too.
I wouldn't be mad at taking him number 1 as a shooter, not because I don't think he's quite the shooter Reed Shepard is, but because of his size, and I think that's a more valuable place for shooting. He shot 91% from the free throw line, and he shot excellently everywhere. And he played 3 years at Iowa, and everyone knew he was a shooter. He shot 90 through 3 years, 91 this past season,
Yep.
and from three, he shot 38%. And you're like, oh well, that's quite a drop off. But the way he shoots, it's unbelievable. Uh, let's do one more in this segment. And I'll take this one just because we're bouncing around. I think it's a similar argument because the percentages are very similar. I'm going to go with Baylor Shireman. I'm not sure I'd put him number 3, but he reminds me of Sanford in terms of the way he shoots is he can do it in different ways. He's the targeted player on the defense. He shoots 38% from 3, and it's catch and shoot or off the dribble. He played 3 years at South Dakota State, and he was the star point guard, meaning he did it off the dribble and he did it using size, shooting over people. Now at Creighton, he was in a beautiful motion offense, was the recipient of a lot of catch and shoots, but then he became the best player on that team, arguably, with a 3rd-team All-American, 1st-team All-Big East, and shot 38% from 3 this year with hands in his face as he raised up the scouting report even from last year. So what's your take on that? I'm not saying he's as good of a pure shooter as those first 2, but I do think it's closer than you'd imagine based off the percentage being 38%.
Yeah, I should have known doing a podcast with you that Baylor Shireman would have come up because for those who don't know, Baylor is Leafs guy. And I actually do like him as a shooter. We've talked about this in past episodes, but there's other areas of his game I'm not huge on. But as a shooter, like I said, if you shoot such a high percentage on such insanely high volume, like I think it was his 2nd or 3rd year, one that he dominated in those 2 years at South Dakota State. He shot at like 47% on 6 attempts per game. And then this last year, he was at 8 attempts per game. And I want to say it was 38%, something around there. So, like, And like you said, it's off of movements, it's off of floppy sets, like it's off of different sets that like are very versatile for NBA offenses. And I do think that that's where he's going to win. Like you want to get him coming off of the screen, you want to get him just sitting in the corner as the standstill shooter. It works.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Samford, by the way, subscribing to my theory of the best shooters are the ones who shoot the most. He shot 7.3 threes per game. That's ridiculous. The number supported. Like I said, for Shepard, he shot 4.4. If you look at Shireman and his catch and shoots, by the way, just because I'm a nerd about this stuff, his catch and shoot percentage is 39%. But while he's guarded, it's hard. He shot far worse, but his unguarded catch and shoot is 49%. 49% unguarded catch and shoot in the Big East, and that was against some of the better defenses in college basketball this year. And now, if you put that into the NBA context, he's going to be lower on the totem pole in terms of in terms of his scouting report. Like he's no longer going to be the first team All American. He's going to be the shooter who comes off screens, rebounds, defends. And so if you get a 49% catch and shoot guy, that's why I really believe that he can shoot the ball at the next level. I almost project him to a role similar to that of like George Niang, but I think he's a better defender initially, and he posts more of like a small forward as opposed to power forward role. But I think he's that type of shooter where he can even if he doesn't turn into the defender and rebounder, I think he can still shoot the ball with that level of freedom, and the team will have that much faith in his shot because he's so willing to hoist it. And he shot 88%, so people believe in those indicators. That's another one. And then in terms of volume, Shireman certainly did not lack for it. He shot 8.3 threes per game. So those are the two highest in terms of volume per game, he and Samford.
Yeah, I mean, I echo all that. Like, if he can, this is a great tease, honestly, for the volume versus percentage. Like, there's really strong arguments, I think, to both.
Yeah, that's the way I've been thinking about it, and I didn't even realize it. I was just like, he's giving more of a leash, is kind of what I said in an episode about Hawkins last year. That's why I thought he was a better shooter than Grady Dick. Why I thought he was a better shooter than Jet Howard. And then I realized, well, you know what it is? It's that he shoots it more than they do, and he shoots it in more difficult ways. Well, it doesn't have to be more difficult, but you have to have the faith of your team to shoot it that way. Well, we're going to continue this discussion. Is volume or percentage more vital? What's the mix? We got a few more really good players coming up. Let's start with, we're going to tell you about Dalton Connect. But first, let me tell you about Nissan. Are you the the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for your city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is always updating assistant to call almost anything. So you can be like, hey, Nissan, call this person, call Richard when we can talk about shooters. And that's what I could do within a 2024 Nissan Rogue. Gone are the days of connecting your phone, Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store. It's built right into your 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. And also, let me tell you about the Nissan Pathfinder 2024. It's top of the line. Has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is here to answer, and it'll find you your path with great map finding as well. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go to your next big adventure. Shop Nissan.com. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. For example, Richard and I could tell you how we really feel about which shooter is the best shooter in the draft class, but that's sometimes it's more complicated than that. And you need the kind, unbiased audience all the same. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and you can create your schedule. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All righty, welcome back to Locked On NBA Big Board. I teased it before we went to the next segment. I want to talk about Dalton Connect, who we talk about more as a scorer in the NBA draft world. But I think because of the way he shoots, in terms of he does it with the hand in his face, he does it off the dribble, he can do it off pin downs, he can do it off flares. I think he's got an argument to be a top 5 shooter. I know we said we're not ranking it 1 through 5. We talked about Shepard being our 1. We talked about Samford being our 2. I mentioned Shireman being in that top 5. I'm not sure he's number 3, but him and Samford had the highest volume of any shooter. But Connect had the hardest diet of shots. Where do you put him in your shooter mix? It doesn't have to be ranked. Just kind of, is he in that upper tier, even though he's kind of described as a scorer more than a shooter?
Yeah, I would have had him 4 or 5 on mine. I think like I buy the shot fully. I just think there's a few more that could be like extremely good specialists.
All right, I think I'd have him in my top 4, and let me give a pitch as to why. Connect shot 40%, 39.7 from 3, and he shot 6.5 threes per game. So he'd be third among those guys in terms of volume. And like I just mentioned, I subscribe to the volume theory, but also the way he shoots it. Connect has this, like, I don't care that there's someone in front of me, but if they can't influence the shot, they're not going to stop me. And I don't think it'll be that same way in the NBA. But what's important is, like, Michael Porter Jr. is a really good example of that. If he can elevate and see the hoop, he's going to shoot it. And obviously, Connect's not as big as Porter, but he does have a high release. And as Jimmy Dykes often says, he's got pro lift. And so what that allows him to do is elevate off of those pin downs on the catch and shoot. If someone's closing out, it won't deter him from shooting. So I really like what Connect has to offer. And the way I foresee his game translating is going to be more like an advanced specialist. Like we talked about Robinson being the prototype for Samford. Well, you could think about him in a Robinson role, but attacking the closeouts more than Robinson does. Puts the ball on the deck, puts pressure on the rim. So I think his gravity as a shooter is what's going to allow him to be a 10 to 14 per game score in the NBA for a while, and maybe even a little bit higher because he's got more of that intermediate game. But I think it's due to the gravity of his shot. And then for those of you who subscribe to, well, how well does he shoot different type of shots? Well, I have your answer. An unguarded catch and shoots, he shoots 47% from 3 on the diet of being the go-to scorer, so probably exhausted. And he shoots about 41% on guarded catch and shoots. So I think he's a really excellent shooter.
Yeah, and on top of that, like he scores so well. Like it's not he scores away from his jump shot too, which I think really opens up the rest of his jump shooting, right? Like when he comes off of the screen, you can't defend him like the way you're defending the other guys we've talked about already off of a screen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Uh, let's discuss just what matters more for you. Is it 3-point percentage or is it free throw percentage when you're evaluating? Because I know I've made my pitch that it's volume, but I said at the beginning of this, everyone has different methods. How much do you factor in if someone shoots it well, the diet of shots they have versus their free throw percentage? Because historically free throw percentage has mattered more. And I'm not saying anything about the prior prospects because they're all good shooters, but just in terms of your draft philosophy, which is the one you prioritize?
Yeah, so like everything, it's a blend. But I think for me, the way I see it is I don't want somebody who has like 80% free throw and like 30, less than 30 if their shots are simply just catch and shoot, stand still. They don't have to do anything special. They don't have to plant their feet, like really get quick feet or footwork, be able to move and adapt on the fly. Like if you're not taking those shots, if you're taking the simplest shots and missing a lot, but you have a high free throw percentage, I'm going to be a little bit less skeptical. Like I'm much more willing to give somebody who is coming off of screens but shooting 28% from 3 a benefit of the doubt than somebody who's shooting like 20 or I guess 30% standstill threes only. So that's kind of a big deal. But I do ultimately, if the 3-point percentage is average and the free throw percentage is really good, I'm going to buy into them. If it's bad 3-point percentage and like average free throw percentage, probably not going to take it. So ultimately, I do think the free throw percentage is where the scales tip, right? Like that's the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, I think that's a well put thing because I'm the believer in, if you can shoot that type of shot and your team is comfortable with it and it's not like a ball hoggy shot, that means you probably have the actual ability to shoot it. I've mentioned Hawkins was the type of guy that I really had faith. I did a similar episode to this last year with Rafael Barlow, in which I said, well, I think Brandon Miller deserves a spot in this list because he shoots off the dribble, he shoots catch and shoot, and all of the percentages are really good. And even though he shoots difficult mid ranges, he has the capacity to make it, which is my pitch for why he should be a top prospect. I did that in the fall, and then as well as once he was already established as a top 3 guy, I said, well, I don't really care if it's standstill shooting. This is the type of shooting I value. So let's do one more here, and I haven't watched as much of him as I have others, but part of the players, like the reason that shooting is becoming so valuable is shooting with size. Well, the guy who probably has that to the T more than anyone else is Zachary Rissache. He's been inconsistent as a shooter of late, but where would you rank him as a shooter? Just a kind of general area, and then like let's just give it the listeners an explanation because he's often compared to Michael Porter Jr., who's among the elite
Yeah.
shooters in the NBA.
Yeah, I had it. There was about 4 different guys in the mix for that last one, including Dalton Connect. Marisa Shea is right there. So for me, the reason he's up there is one, he's 6'10" and he shoots a great percentage. Two, it's not just that he didn't. I don't think actually know the percentage is that great, but like the touch is so obvious and the shot looks good. Like he's somebody where like I honestly don't even care what that 3-point percentage looks like as long as it's not abysmal. His free throw percentage is strong. I'm going to buy into him. And the big reason why too is he sets his feet quicker than any prospect at his size. Really, even I'd say 6'8" and above, probably off the top of my head. I might be missing somebody, but I really do think he has some of the quickest feet in terms of going like sprint to stop in catch and shoot, and that really works in transition. And obviously, the NBA is a fast league. The fact that he can go play in transition on the wings and on to the corners, filling out the lane, I think that's really helpful, and that's where he's going to make his money. So I have him right in that mix. I've gone back and forth even while we're doing this. I'm like, ooh, I should have put this guy in there, but Rissache probably feels like the solid 5th guy.
Yeah, I wanted to put him in here because he's probably got the most desirable comp of any of these guys shooting the basketball. For reference, Risa Shea is shooting 40% on catch and shoots, 31% on guarded catch and shoots, and 46% on unguarded catch and shoots. So he really lights it up, especially when he's able to get his feet set. I don't think he's the type of athlete that allows him to come off pin downs and like, elevate like at the same level that Michael Porter Jr. does, but I do think he's got that really quick footwork so he can set and catch and transition of the ilk of the way Michael Porter Jr. does when he runs the floor and Denver plays their best
Yep.
basketball in transition. Um, Coming up next, we're going to go with Richard's kind of last guys that he's considered because I have a few and I think he's got a few that'll probably overlap, but we'll let you know a few of them. But first, I wanted to ask you guys: are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN and you're on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume because you hear all that shouting? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. And Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I also wanted to tell you guys about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find the right quality professionals that are perfect for that role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board that I peruse frequently as someone looking for jobs. LinkedIn also helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. I mean, that's the pitch right there. If you want to get a job and be a professional, do it like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back into Locked On NBA Big Board. It's Leif, Thulin, and Richard Stayman, two people who feel very strongly about shooting and the importance of shooting. We both love analyzing it. Richard and I have had many conversations about shooting just for fun, both our own jump shots and, more importantly, the shots of the prospects. So, Richard, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Who are some guys that round out your top 5 through 7 shooting and that we haven't mentioned yet, and give me a pitch as to why they are in your top upper echelon in the draft class.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a top shooters, excuse me, discussion without bringing up Connecticut's Alex Caravan. I mean, he's a vital piece. He was a vital piece of the UConn back-to-backs. 6'9", extremely quick shot, a little bit unorthodox motion, but strong touch, very, very quick in going from catch to shoot. It's completely one motion. I really like his game just as a shooter. I think he might struggle a little bit to come off of screens because he can really only go. I want to say it's going left. He can say I rarely see him going right, but ultimately that's something that I feel like when you're that good of a shooter, you kind of figure it out.
Yeah, he kind of falls under the radar. He's someone I've got in my top 40 as a prospect, and as a shooter, he's up there. He shot 38% from three, and he also had a thumb injury this year, so I think that actually negatively impacted his shot. And the fact that he shot 38 from three with that injury is really impressive. And I don't think many people realized he had an injury on his shooting hand because he shot well and he played every game, just kind of a no nonsense guy. He also shot 88.5% from free throw line, and he shot 5.5 threes per game. So he has good volume. Like I mentioned, 7.3 and 8.3. Shireman at 8.3. Samford had 7.3. Well, Caravan, if he were on a team that wasn't UConn, where it was unbelievably balanced offensively, I think he'd have more volume. I like that one. There's one guy that I think in this draft has the size and shooting of Caravan, and then we talked about him just a moment ago, and that's Risashe. And I think they're different in the way they do it. Caravan's more of like a true pick and pop. Maybe he fits into that Niang role I mentioned as someone who spaces the floor, known as a shooter. Um, is there anything more on Caravan, or should I mention one?
Next one.
All right, I'm going to go with Jared McCain of Duke. Jared McCain of Duke has a slightly unconventional shot. He's got a pretty wide base, but he gets it off quickly. And I would argue that this year, despite Filipowski being first team All ACC, that the best player on Duke was Jared McCain. And I don't think that's crazy to say, because when Jared McCain played well is when Duke played their best basketball. He was a bit of a barometer for them. He also shot exactly the same percentage as Caravan, 88.5% from the free throw line. So if you believe in that, that's a good thing. He also shot 41.4% from three and on 5.8 attempts. So even more volume from a younger player, and you hardly see that. And you're like, oh, he went to Duke. They always have freshmen that shoot a lot. Well, this year was a slightly older team. Like Roach and Proctor were in the backcourt. McCain wasn't slotted to start at the beginning of the year. Kind of elevated throughout time. He had some games where he caught absolute like torrid heaters. He went 8 for 11 against Florida State from three. He went 8 for 11 against James Madison from three in the tournament. Had numerous games where he was so good from three that they'd run him off the line and he'd create havoc. And I think he's got a little more upside as someone who can shoot floaters and get into the paint and create havoc, even though he's undersized as an NBA player, because he'll have more space. He head fakes and he's got a little more guile to his game than some of the guys we're talking about. So I know that's not straight shooting, but I think he's got shooting plus touch indicators to the max.
Yeah, and also, like, speaking of the older Duke team, or I guess not super relevant, but he is 20 as a freshman too. So like that was a very experienced team for their age too. But I do like McCain. I like McCain a lot. That's probably his biggest knock, is he's 20 and he's a little bit undersized because he's not a point guard. But you cannot doubt that jump shot. The same thing as Reed Shepherd. The way he gets into that shot off the dribble is so quick, and he's actually faster than Reed. So that matters a lot too. I like the McCain shout out.
McCain, for those of you who want consistency in his catch and shoot numbers, he shot 42% on catch and shoots, 43.8% on guarded catch and shoots, believe it or not, which is unbelievable, and then 39% on unguarded. So I honestly think that's probably a fluke that his unguarded was lower, and I actually expect it to be higher in the NBA. Like, mind you, we said Shireman shot 49 on unguarded and 39, 49 on unguarded, 31 on guarded, but he was being swarmed all the time. Samford had a better unguarded. So the fact McCain shoots nearly 44% on guarded really inspires a lot of faith. Let's go two more, Richard. Hit me with who you got next.
Yeah, I would throw Jalen Bridges in there. I think just looking at that size plus shooting combo, I had somebody talk to me about him and they told me pretty well. They're like, look, if you get somebody 6'7" that can just shoot, like, you have to take a chance for that, especially after 20. he shot 41% from three this year on 5 attempts per game. I think his touch has always been there the last couple of years. I just think he struggled a little bit to get the ball to go in the basket, but this year really was put together, and the free throw percentage is really strong. Pretty much a career 80% from the line, just a hair short, but like it rounds up. So I really buy his game with the size. I've recently really just invested in him.
I think that's an interesting one because, like you said, his role is kind of what he'll play at the next level. And that matters because he'll be accustomed to the type of shots, the diet of shots he'll get. Some people have a difficulty adjusting to the shot types that they'll get in the NBA, and some thrive in it. I think he'll be one that is accustomed to it. I've got one more, and I know you've liked this player for a long time. I'm going to go with Tristan da Silva from Colorado.
Yep.
Tristan da Silva shot 39.5% from three, and I would argue he shot terribly for the beginning of the year. So, like when he started the year, he was not shooting well at all. He also shot 84% from the free throw line. His volume was pretty good. He shot 5 threes a game. Da Silva is one of those guys to me that he's super plug and play. And if I'm drafting at the tail end of the first round, and I'm like, well, who can play for my team? As so many teams are coveting rookies that are old enough and ready enough to play in the NBA, and say, well, we need players to be on our minimums, our rookie deals that can step in and play basketball intelligently. He's at the top of that list in terms of readiness. He's not a gifted athlete, but he is tall. He shoots it pretty quickly. And in big games, he played really well, which matters to me because the Pac-12 wasn't very good this year. But when it mattered, he played well. And in the tournament, he was sensational in the 2 games, or I guess 3 games because they want to play in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like Tristan da Silva a lot. I think he was scouted wrong last year, and I'm really glad he came back because now I feel like he's been scouted correctly. Kind of like you said, the beginning of the year was rough, but really from February on, he was just a lights out shooter. I also think with him, he's somebody that like he's different from a lot of these other shooters because he does other things with the ball in his hands. Like he is a underrated, flashy passer for whatever reason. Like he really can attack that. Like if he's coming off of the screen, they bite on the shot, and he takes his first dribble in. The defense doesn't know what's going to happen, and as a shooter, that's like the best thing you can have is being unpredictable coming off of a screen. So I do like Da Silva, and also he's a fantastic standstill catch and shoot shooter as well.
Yeah, he's an excellent cutter as well. He's very, very heady, knows where to be. Any last player? This is the last one we'll turn over to you.
I think that pretty much rounds out my truly guys I value this high up. I would say if everything goes right for him, there is somebody that could be a strong candidate in terms of just like, okay, if he does learn to shoot, I think there is somebody that we could get in this list. And ultimately, I think if it comes down to upside again, is Jacoby Walter. And I hesitate because I'm like, okay, we've seen it a lot. We've talked about it. Like he can pull up and shoot, but so much of it is theoretical right now. Like he has good form. I've seen him through Dallas. He's grown as a shooter, but it's far away. But if everything works out, if we're talking about guys who hit and like if everybody hits their upside as a shooter, he is probably going to crack that top 5. He's just far away right now.
I agree with that. I'm lower on him not because I don't believe his shooting. I actually believe in his shooting because he had a pretty steady diet of shots and a license to take them as a freshman, and it's hard to adjust to that. And that, like I said, I subscribe to volume. And I've got 2 more. One of whom I don't think of as a shooter, but I think he can really light it up, and he takes a different diet of shots than anyone else. And that's Rob Dillingham, who I've got in my top 3 right now as a prospect. But Dillingham, unguarded catch and shoots. He shoots 46% on catch and shoot entirely. He shoots 48%. He shoots 50% on unguarded catch and shoots. And off the dribble, he's sensational as well as a shooter. So he's a really good basketball player and a really good shooter. It's just like we don't think of him as a shooter. So he didn't crack my mind. So he would have been higher had I thought of like more than just catch and shoot guys. And the last guy is Cam Spencer. Oh my goodness. I had to sneeze. Cam Spencer, I don't think he is going to be a high pick, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the guy comes off pin downs more than any player in college basketball, flies off of them and shoots the lights out. So if he's selected and within the draft, which I think he might be, I'd be remiss not mentioning. So that'll do it for us. It's been a pleasure talking to you about our favorite topics, shooting, because it's always wonderful to analyze. And it's always a pleasure talking with you guys on Locked On NBA Big Board. But right before I sign off, let me remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel available on YouTube. And it's also now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with local experts of Locked On Plus, our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So thank you guys so much for listening to Richard and I talk about shooting. We love chatting with you, and we'll be back shortly. Have a great day and make your next listen Locked On NBA.